And okay, so that transcript is always very distracting. All right, so good morning. It is 8:34 on a lovely August 5th. So first we'll just get started to see if there's anybody from the public here to make a comment. And it does not appear to be so we'll just do attendance. So Ram.
Present.
Barry's on vacation. Patrick.
Here.
Jeet is on vacation. Lauren is here. Rachel.
Present.
Fred.
Here.
Vacation. Paul.
Hello.
Okay, great. I thought I saw you. Susan.
Present.
Maura is on vacation. Okay. So it looks like we have a smallish group today. Thanks for joining. So the first item we have on the agenda is an outcome map update. So Scott, I don't know if you want to share slides right now. But as a reminder, the 3 big expected outcomes that we had confirmed, and Lauren is here. Welcome, Lauren.
Morning.
So as a reminder, the expected outcomes that we had for this year were to increase the efficiency of the P20 system and participating agencies in fulfilling data requests. Agencies and staff are engaged and have the knowledge to effectively contribute to P20 and then to integrate equity and transparency into the data request management process. So for that first one, our primary outputs would be to establish a structure to handle new data requests, and this is an ongoing process that we are working on, and as new data requests are submitted, we are learning new ways to do things in a more efficient manner. We're hiring staff. We have Sarah Caro at CSEU, we have Coral at OPM, and we've just recently done some interviews for another analyst. And then we have actively been working on improving our documentation, and Coral has been working on that with the policy and processes for data matching, metadata maintenance, data privacy, etc. For the second outcome, it was focused on standardizing processes. And so our onboarding process has been documented and standardized, so all new agencies and staff receive the same onboarding and introduction to P20 We're constantly building and fostering relationships with all of you here. And then the data sharing agreements that we've been working with all of you on that are in varying states of use. But we have been able to use the new data sharing agreement templates for many of our new active data requests. And then for the last one, for the equity and transparency in the data request management process, we have joined the AISP Equity and Practice Learning Community. And that will give us an opportunity to work on building and constructing our resident advisory board, while also looking at other standards for integrating equity into the data request and management process. And we've been working with DSS on this project as well as OHS. And then jumping back to standardized documentation, I'm going to, so unless there are no questions about the outcome map, I'm going to actually throw this over to Coral, who created a data dictionary app that she's going to demo for the group.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. have to refresh it 1 second. Okay, so this is the P20 Win Data Dictionary app. We're hoping that this will be helpful in kind of increasing efficiency in data request process because it's easier to filter through and search for data elements. And it includes all of the data elements from the P20 Win Data Dictionary that we currently have. And so as you can see, you can filter by agency, by program. So program is, for example, the Department of Labor has several different programs that we receive data dictionaries from. So that could be unemployment, apprenticeship, jobs first employment services. So that's program. It's not available for every agency. And then data categories, things like student, enrollment data, employment data, demographics. And then there's the actual data element name, and then the data element definition. And then kind of hidden is when available, the data types that could be character, date, numeric, anything like that, integer, and then the dates and years that it is available. So you can filter. So if you go in, say you want data from the Department of Labor and the Office of Higher Ed, and you want just from the Department of Labor only unemployment, and that's it. So you want everything from the Office of Higher Ed, which would be, and then unemployment, and then you only want employment and student data. And that will give you all the elements from those two agencies in those programs and data categories. And then if you wanted to kind of extract those specific elements rather than having the full Excel document that we currently have available, you can either do it in a CSV or an Excel, and it will only pull the elements that you've filtered to. So then say if you're putting together your data request, you know what elements you want, you can just pull that Excel document and then use that to fill in the element list that we have. You can also filter by specific keywords. So say you know that you want data and you're not sure what elements you want, but you want something that has somewhere mentions graduation, like graduate. So you could just look that up and you get every element that we have that's somewhere in either the data category, data element name, or in the definition uses the word graduate. And you can use any keyword that you want. And that's pretty much it. I can't see anybody, so if you have questions, just go ahead and speak up. But if not, that is it.
This is awesome.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It looks like it's a Shiny app. So is this something that could be replicated if agencies wanted their own? Or I'm assuming it's easily updatable because it's based on a table.
Yes, so it is a Shiny app, and I have the scripts for it that if agencies wanted to build their own, I could share. It uses the DT data table language, and then the filters are also just, so if you had a different data set, you could easily just plug that in and then run it.
I'm not as adept with the actual technology. However, I'm really excited about the product, and I think it's going to be really useful for all of us.
Our plan is to connect Our plan is to connect this to the data request process so that instead of sending a giant Excel file, this can be used for that data request, the requested variable spreadsheet, just so that it doesn't have to be such a manual process. So this is part of our focus on automating some of these processes so that it's an easier, more accessible process.
I just to add to what Katie's saying, just to ground this in things that people have put time into in the past. So we had like the technical review sessions last year that I know some of you participated in. One of the conclusions from that was something we could do is to try and streamline the request process. And if you're in those, you remember we did focus groups with data requesters. So hearing from like researchers and others who've been asking for data but from the state in various ways in the past. And one of the things they said is that just a lot of like questions on what data are available, the descriptions of those elements, and it just chews up a lot of time and like back and forth and understanding that. So something that like presents that in a way that is hopefully like a little easier to interact with, and then we can like extend and build upon is just again to ground it, like it's built on that process of going through the technical review. We heard feedback that that aspect of the process is like tough for people to navigate and it chews up a bunch of time, and I think this is going to hopefully make that a little bit easier. And Rachel, to your point, like it could be extended and used in other settings as well. Sorry, Jan, you put your hand up while I was talking. So
yeah, sure. So this is great, Carl, like I said. And so as the functionality is potentially fleshed out to use as a part of the data request process, one of the things that's particularly important to CSCU is the ability to justify the usage of each particular element and tie it to the specific purpose for which it's being requested. So I just want to throw that out in however the app is built, that be a component so that the requester is required to say, at least for requests that utilize CSCU data, they need this particular element for this particular purpose in their analysis and how it's tied to it. So just want to throw that out. That's super important to us. And I think there's the possibility of doing that. So thanks for this beginning work. It's great.
Dan, I'm curious, do you mean like in the definition, there should be some kind of statement about, requesters can access these data if, or like for a specific purpose? Because the way I'm reading the app is sort of like, this is the list of all the possible data, but not all of its possible uses. I think that's really important because I get similar questions all the time around PII and the elements that have PII that people think can be easily extracted. So I'm just curious if that's something to flag for everybody, but I'm curious if that's what you mean.
Not exactly. I wouldn't see it in the data dictionary. I would see it in the process when somebody is selecting them for a particular request. There's going to have to be some sort of extraction. And then I think that would have to add to it why they need those particular elements at that point. I think it's hard to say, because the elements can be used for a myriad of different purposes. To put all the purposes in the data dictionary, I think might be too much.
Got it.
Any other comments or questions about the data dictionary? Nothing? Okay. So we're really excited about this. We'll keep you updated as this evolves, but this is going to be a really great supplement to the data request process, and so we will keep you apprised. So the next item on the agenda is data security, and I will throw it over to Scott.
I think we'll do an intro, but I would kind of welcome Jan or Lauren, or maybe in a second, Coral, to fill in on this. This is something I think has been actually is also an outgrowth of the technical review process that a lot of folks went through last year. It's something that we do not really have a great framework for, and I appreciate both. I think CSCU kind of brought this to the fore as like an issue to tackle, and so we want to have like an introductory discussion to kick off the topic today, but we'll have a more in-depth discussion hopefully in September when we've got a little better showing here. So what do we mean by data security? I think there's two ways in which this kind of comes up for P20 Win as a system, and we want to have sort of the policies and processes to address both of these cases in a systematic fashion, which we have elements of, but we can, I think, always do sort of a better job for. So one way in which data security comes up is we get it a lot, particularly through OPM. We get questions a lot about this from data requesters for sort of the same reasons. They say, okay, I'd like to request data. I'd like to, I'm planning an analysis or a study or a report or something. I'd like to make a data request. Do I have the environment in place, or do I have the types of things that I would need to actually make a data request? So the requesters say, like, what do I need to make a data request? And we don't have a great way of indicating to people the kinds of things that the agencies expect in order to, sort of review and make a determination on a request. So on one side, we want to be able to present something to the data requesters that says sort of, this is what we're looking for. This is sort of the bar, the threshold that we're hoping that you meet, or the key elements, or the kinds of things that we want to make sure that you're considering. So whether that's like the type of environment in which the data is, how you're handling backups, how you're handling access to that, how, the types of, machines or whatever that are involved in that. So something for the data requesters, so that we can be transparent about sort of, here's the expectations that the agencies have before they release data for a request. The other side is after the request goes through, when data is released to the data recipient, we really have what I would call like contractual security. So we have security is enforced through the data sharing agreements. We don't have an enclave that people log into. We don't monitor access and use. And so we really want to know before agencies release data, what is the world into which you're releasing that data. So if you get to the point where there's a data request, you're signing off on a data sharing agreement, multiple agencies have sort of matched and moved the data forward, where is that data ending up on the other side? So what the people to whom you're with whom you're sharing it, how are they handling it? What are their protocols on their side? And so I think that's sort of the other primary element that we have, covered a little bit in sort of a contractual form with the data sharing agreements, but we don't have a consistent way that that's kind of assessed. There isn't a way that that's monitored in sort of an ongoing basis. So those are sort of, I think, sort of the two primary elements that we've have come up, at least from my perspective, as kind of concerns over time. And we, have elements of it, but we don't have like a holistic framework to sort of deal with both of those cases. And we don't have like what in this case, I think what we would do is develop a policy and the processes for P20 WIN that all sort of agencies can adhere to. And we've got sort of a consistent way of presenting that to data requesters, both beforehand and then sort of after the eventual release of data. And I would say that the release of data covers both when it's being released back to an agency. So it could be one of you in this meeting. So it could be, an agency's requesting data through other agencies, or it could be sort of a third party requester. So it could be like, academia or a nonprofit evaluator or something like that. So I think of sort of both of those cases. But once the data is released, it's really outside of our direct custody. And so we want to have as much information as possible about the world into which you're releasing it. So I think those are sort of the core elements, kind of as I understand it, that we're looking to address. And again, I'm grateful to Jan and Lauren for sort of bringing this up as a topic, but it's been a longstanding issue that I think we, are in a good position to start to pull together, think about the way in which we want to address it and the framework for doing that. I don't know, Jan, Lauren, other things you want to add to it, and then before responded. The other thing we have, I think, at Coral, I don't want to put you on the spot, but we went and surveyed a couple of other sites, other SLDS, so sort of how they handle this. So it might help to walk through some of the examples, and you can see like, okay, how some places have, different frameworks. There isn't one way to do this, and so there's a variety of different ways I think you guys could take a look at. And again, we're, I think, really kicking this discussion off this week. But given sort of the attendance and the timing, we'll hopefully pick it up in a more in-depth fashion in September. And I'd say sort of behind the scenes too, we've had, I think, pretty good engagement from the CISOs, the Chief Information Security Officers, both from higher ed and from the state. So I think none of us, I don't think any of us are security professionals. I'm certainly not. So we want to draw on the expertise of those individuals when necessary. But I think from the perspective of the members of this group, like those are at least the two ways in which I see security issues kind of playing out, from being able to explain to requesters and then after the release of data, ensuring that you know what you're getting yourselves into as an agency.
Thanks for introducing that, Scott. Lauren, do you want me to say a few words?
Sure, and then I can mention a couple things that I'm aware of also.
Okay, great. So we were hoping actually, this isn't Lauren's and my area of expertise. It's really the security folks who've been engaged. So Peter was supposed to be, I think, the primary sort of describer today, but I just got an email. He's sick, feeling really awful, heading off to get tested. So he couldn't join us this morning. So in lieu of that, I just want to shape kind of how we came to this a little bit. So as the various agencies were working on the template MOU, and CSU and UConn were working together on it as well, and our timing was slower than everybody else's, so we're in a different place with that. We were focusing very much on the security aspect in the agreements and wanting to make sure we're very clear with what the responsibilities are of the different parties in terms of security. And so in those discussions and working with CSU and UConn's chief security officers, as well as Jeff Brown from the state, trying to look at a model that might work, because when you have you've got agency that has certain, security standards with the state that could be different from what a data requester might have, and yet security is still very critical. So is it right for us, or not right, is it possible really for all requesters for us to say, you need to meet X bar, and this is the bar, when that really might not be achievable? So what the security officers were discussing was a risk-based assessment, so that the participating agencies' data are being requested would be able to understand what the risk is with the security. So maybe you're working with an entity, a national entity like Mathematica or something, and they can meet that federal bar for, FISMA or FedRAMP security or whatever, and that's no problem. But maybe you're working with somebody else, a professor somewhere who's working with, a different type of environment. And so you need to understand what the risks are associated with what they're requesting and what they're going to do with the data in their particular environment. So what the security folks proposed was a particular standard assessment that's used nationally that allows somebody receiving data or who has data, and actually it would probably be used by all the participating agencies too, to document kind of what they do, and then that can be then used in assessing if you're willing to work with them to give them your data. And I would just make one modification to what Scott was saying. It's not really about after the request, it's definitely before. So we need to have this information before request is approved, definitely before. So that's, and Peter has a great diagram about a potential flow for how we could have these assessments sort of completed and then stored, and that's all for further discussion. But that's my take on kind of how we got to where we are and what this all means. What did you want to add, Lauren?
I think you covered everything, but our team gave us an example of a vendor, and I put it in the chat, and that has an assessment tool in it. It's like an annual purchase. So I think you covered everything, though. It's kind of like the before and after of sharing the data. So, and like Jan said, the before would be this whole risk assessment process for a requester. And so I think you got it all. And I'm not an expert on this area, so it would be good to have those people on a call to, talk about it further. So I think you got it, Jan.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. And thanks for the link. Turning it back to you, Scott.
I just want to see if there's other just questions just on the general topic. I know a handful of people are going to have to drop at 9, so to get anything queued up for discussion next month. The Coral, if you are comfortable, we've gone through and surveyed a few of the other sites, so I think it's worth going through like how other places handle these kinds of issues. Again, there's a handful of different frameworks out there, so we could go through some examples, and maybe that helps jog people's thinking about, okay, well, what are the elements that we want to put in place here? Any other sort of quick comments or things to attend to, again, before queuing up a more in-depth discussion about this next month? All right, I'm gonna share screen. I'll pull the slides up, Coral, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sounds great.
Where did they go? Wrong direction. Can you see my screen again?
Yes.
All right, cool. I'm gonna mute.
Great. So I looked at, I think, 4 different states that have kind of publicly made aware what their process is for data security and privacy. So first up is Washington. So during the data request process, they require that data requesters complete a data security form. So this is more of a questionnaire, but there are some open-ended questions. And requesters must prove that they have technical proficiency to store the data in a secure environment, confirm their understanding of relevant data privacy laws and regulations, and agree to strict protocols regarding how the data is stored. And so it has questions on, prior incidents and breaches, if they do security audits, if they have a security plan, a data security plan, if they have any disciplinary policies for when staff might kind of go around the data security plan, what do they do? And then also, do they have data that can already be linked to the requested data to re-identify? And then there's further questions that aren't on the form that they don't publicize that they ask to ensure that those 2 data sets are maintained separately and not brought together. Next slide. Second state is North Carolina. So very similarly, during the data request process, they require a data security plan. So rather than a questionnaire, this is just an open-ended, they're required to write up a data security plan, but it must include and describe all the locations where any data and paper files will be kept, the secure network server on which data will be stored, how the network handles any system backups, and how long system backup copies of the data are kept. The network security protocols, including protections for the original data sent and any temporary analysis files. Any information on how files are tracked, accounted for, and the schedule for deletion, as well as the security system that will prevent unauthorized access to the data and whether the system is used by other projects. And then next slide. Third is Kentucky. So Kentucky has a different method, so they don't require at the moment. They're currently building their data security. So they don't have a data security form or plan. They just require requesters describe the application methods that will be used to destroy confidential data in their MOU. But they do have a data management best practice checklist on their data security and privacy page that includes sections for the review of mandatory requirements. These are any state or federal laws, the annual review of policies, processes, procedures, guidelines, any new, a guideline for new employee awareness, annual training plan, and then also guidelines for internal data access process, external data request process, data sharing agreements, data inventory, security protocols, system inventory, data breach best practices, and then data governance and transparency. And then they also state that they're in the process of creating a data security training plan, as well as a data security training video series. And then the last one is Maryland. So Maryland has a different setup. They have a center where all of the data is maintained, so it's different than what we have, but they limit access to only de-identified data. Only aggregate data can be used in reports, and then they have a threshold which they didn't state the sample size that has to be reported, and if it's any less than that, it has to be taken out. And then, but they did establish the role of a privacy officer, and that is someone who's accountable for developing, implementing, and maintaining an organization-wide governance and privacy program to ensure compliance with all applicable laws, state and federal, as well as regulations regarding the retrieval, use, maintenance, sharing, and disposal of the student and workforce data. And then they are also developing a privacy training, which will be administered annually for personnel that work with that student and workforce data. That's it.
All right, I'm gonna unscreen share, and we'll send these out afterwards. And there's like a slightly longer kind of written version of it that goes in a little more detail. And again, if folks are, I think, to sort of get prep for a session in September, if folks want other examples, or we can sort of track down some more cases, I think these all sort of fit with the concept that Jan described as sort of risk-based assessment where it's not, I know I said threshold at some point, but like there isn't like a single bar or thresholds. It's just it's a assessment based on the particular case, the request, the environment, sort of the a variety of different factors, and each of those I think have that sort of framework behind it. And it's nice to see the examples where there's some transparency for the requester, so you can kind of carry the same standards end to end through the process. I don't know if there's questions. I am curious. I saw Fred put something in the chat. I'm curious for I don't know for who do we have? Rachel, Paul, Fred, Susan. Have you for like how your agencies handle this, or if it's something this is if there's agency practices we can draw on, then we'll pull those into. If there's something that's I'm sorry, you're on screen. Sorry, I'm reading the other side. So.
Yeah, I'll just say we have a pretty extensive list of requirements in our data sharing agreements, but otherwise we don't really have a process like this where we're assessing the requester's environment like this. So I think it's a great add. Definitely would strengthen up our security.
So we do include, Susan, so we do include in our data request form specific questions about how data is going to be stored, whether or not there is any kind of security network mapping that can be shared. So our security officer did help us develop that, but I think this is a little bit more robust, so I'd certainly be interested in looking to augment what we have.
I don't know if you needed everyone to report out, but I think of everyone, we're going to have the least robust processes as we're getting into using data sharing agreements and legal frameworks. This, I think anything always adds value at the OEC.
I'm curious for Paul and CCH. I don't know if
Yeah, sorry, my Teams is slow, so I click unmute and then I have to wait like 5 seconds. So I apologize. Yeah, we have some strict data standards as far as using the HMIS system, but as far as like a data request goes, we don't have anything, at least that I'm aware of, that kind of, I mean, we ask what they're going to do with the data, of course, right? But we don't have like strict policies on how they're storing the data we give them. So, and we're currently working on a data security plan right now, but we have, I mean, there's some pretty strict stuff in our MOUs and our data sharing agreements.
that's helpful. Yeah, I think we'll try and, in this case, maybe collect all of the examples here, collect some more examples, share those with folks before September. I don't know if there's other suggestions on this or kind of the approach. Let us know. But again, like this is something I think has been kind of a longstanding issue, and it's a good opportunity to develop a policy and a process for the system as a whole, so that there's an approach and that people can come to some consensus on a way that we're addressing this and bringing it forward to the requesters. Again, whether those requesters are from these agencies or from external sort of third-party requesters. Anything else?
Just curious, have you gotten as far as looking at what the cost of like the one that you put in the chat would be? Looks like there was there's a membership kind of thing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think on that one.
6,000? Okay,
Yeah,
that's not bad. Yeah.
So one thing before we move on from this topic is, so we know that this is going to be the primary discussion for our September meeting, which is currently scheduled for the Friday of Labor Day weekend. So just gonna take a very informal poll to find out if any of you will be around on that Friday, or if we should reschedule it to September 16th, which would be our learning session. And if you don't say anything, I'm assuming that Labor Day weekend is fine for folks.
Yeah, far as I know, I'll be here.
Okay.
Yeah, both are good for me. We could have used a poll in Teams.
I think that we don't have like the fancy Teams version because I don't have that.
You have.
I don't have
You've
that.
got forms built in. You could make a quick form. I'm just saying. I'm not trying to make it difficult. We did this in a meeting recently, and people were throwing dates around, and I was like, no.
I don't have forms.
We'll have to discuss offline.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So, all right. We will, for the time being, plan to move forward as scheduled. And we'll follow up with folks as we have to get the CISOs also involved. Okay, great. So moving on, we have a pretty brief learning agenda update. Many of the same data requests are actively in review, or we're in the process of creating accounts for data to be transmitted for matching purposes. But we do have a quick update on the creation of the Roberta Willis Scholarship Program data request. And so I'm going to throw it to Ram and or Coral.
Thanks, Katie. Just wanted to first thank Scott and Coral for spearheading this potential project, applying for this grant. They've done yeoman's work on this, so it's an exciting time for us. So the purpose of the request obviously is to evaluate, post-secondary enrollment outcomes and workforce outcomes on the Roberta Willis program. To drill a bit down a little further is, what are the demographic and outcomes of Connecticut students that receive state financial grants. Demographic categories of interest include race and ethnicity, hometown, eligibility for a free and reduced lunch. In addition to that, on average, how much additional aid is provided to students that receive that state grant? And lastly, what percentage of state financial aid recipients are found employed in Connecticut after graduation? And that's actually a specifically important one. Obviously we're investing in these students, and we want to make sure that we retain as many as possible. So I'd be very curious to see, how we do in that area. The feedback that we received has been very positive. The first one obviously is that they're very encouraged, specifically that so many state administrators are involved in this concept. And so they were very excited about that opportunity. Additionally, they wanted to make sure to communicate to us that the primary intent of the grant is to facilitate research and not necessarily for us to be able to have a database construction project. In addition to that, other feedback they provided was look beyond quantifying subgroups differences, but to explore ways to improve academic outcomes of disadvantaged subgroups. The combination, and they also like the combination, of P20 working with all these other agencies. So they're very excited about that. And lastly, what the feedback they gave was that we should partner with an academic, who has the expertise in quasi experimental methods, as that would strengthen our research plan section. And I wanted to just extend a thank you for Jen Witness for giving us a suggestion of who we should reach out to. So that's the feedback we've received. The application, final application is due, I believe, September 8th, and we'll be meeting, with many of you, as we move forward to finalize, our application. That's what I have on my end.
want to put anyone on the spot, but this is, I think, one of 2 letters of intent that different agencies submitted for the SLDS grant opportunities coming up. And so we have to iron out some of the details, but I think folks may hear kind of offline about those. And if we need assistance, if the agencies leading those need assistance, then we will. You'll hear about that in the next several weeks. But the Roberta Willis one, I think, is building on some of the momentum there, and is a important policy question for the state. So it's a good opportunity. Yeah, I forget what was next on the agenda, but back to you.
Okay. All right. So that was the learning agenda update. So the next item on, I didn't know if anybody else had things to add about the learning agenda. So the next item on the agenda is the executive board meeting. If you want to share the screen for this slide. So it's scheduled for Tuesday, August 16th at 2 p.m. We are in the process of drafting an agenda to be shared for review with Commissioner Gifford. So right now, the topics that we have included are funding and sustainability and the grant opportunities that we referenced just now, potential research partnerships, and then updates on active data requests. Are there topics that anybody from the group thinks we should include in our agenda?
I would suggest that the equity and practice learning community activities I may actually want to include it as a standard so that the equity piece is always on the agenda.
Great idea. It's a great idea. Make a note of that. Anything else? So this looks good to folks.
I mean, obviously I can chat more because we'll be talking about this, but I don't know if there's anything more on the consent management piece that we also want to talk about. I know Commissioner Gifford was particularly interested in that.
Okay, so both good ideas. Hearing nothing else.
Oh, Katie, I'm sorry, this is Jan. I don't know if you saw my question in the chat. I was just wondering,
Oh
are there
no,
any?
sorry, I didn't see.
That's okay. Are there any items that the group will be asked to vote on? And if so, what?
Not that we're aware of currently.
Okay, thanks.
We may, I think we'll know in the next week, there may be onboarding for new agencies, but we're not sure the timing will match with the board meeting. So that would require a vote, but we will notify everyone in advance. We just don't have enough clarity to know if that's going to get across the finish line.
Which agencies?
So we've had interest from public health, mental health, and addiction services. So we are trying to get forward. We've had good discussions with judicial branch for criminal justice and some with Office of Health Strategy too. I'm not sure who will get over the finish line, but I think folks recall there was pretty robust discussion several months ago about onboarding new agencies. And so in response to executive board interest, we've reached out to and sort of pursued that. So again, just a slow process. There's been staff turnover in a few places, so we're not 100% sure what'll kind of make it over the line. If that does happen, then we'll notify everyone here, executive board members, if that requires a sort of vote to approve, and then we'll amend the EMOU for that as well. I don't know of any amendments to the language of it. It would just be adding the agencies at this point.
Cool. Nice.
TBD. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then moving on to updates. So we are actively working on different policies and processes. And so as they are completed, we will be sharing those with you all for review and approval. And then our last item is the Data Governing Board learning session. So on Friday, August 19th, Ajit is going to be talking with us about the Connecticut COVID-19 Education Research Collaborative and how we could possibly partner with them in future evaluation opportunities and research projects. So other than that, I don't have anything else on the agenda. Our next meeting is going to be Friday, September 2nd, unless that does not work for our CISOs. But other than that, that is everything. I'll follow up with minutes with folks. And then, you know, the big topic for our September session will be on data security. So any thoughts, comments, questions before we wrap up? Hearing nothing. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. I will talk to all of you soon, I'm sure. Have a good one.
Great day, everyone.
Bye, you too.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
Take it easy.